Hello everyone, welcome back to Spider-Man Page by Page. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Dan.
And today, Dan and I are going to talk about The Amazing Spider-Man number 9. It's the first appearance of Electro.
Yeah, Electro, one of the classic Spider-Man rogues. He's a character that I do like a lot, if nothing just because of his powers and the way he looks. Like, he doesn't usually get a whole lot of deep characterization or anything like that.
Oh, that's true.
We did try to do things with him when The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was, gearing up to come out, and, we did do some stuff with him there, but he's just kind of one of those Spider-Man bad guys that's just kind of a regular dude that gets superpowers, and I like him because of that. He's kind of a classic, molded in the way that a lot of the classic Spider-Man villains are, where they're just kind of like regular dudes that get powers, and they're a nice contrast to Peter Parker in that way.
Yeah, they're all supposed to be mirrors for him. They're what he could have been if he didn't learn the responsibility lesson.
Exactly, and as we'll see in his origin here, I picture Electro because Uncle Ben was a guy that worked on bridges and stuff. Electro's kind of like a blue collar worker kind of guy like Uncle Ben. That's just bad and got powers, which is cool.
Yeah, and I think is even. I mean, obviously he is an adult. He's an older guy, older than Peter Parker, but I see him, at least just based on this first issue, as the closest thing to Peter Parker we've gotten for a villain who ended up getting superpowers.
That's true.
He's taking advantage of people before that. He's trying, and we'll get to his origin here in a second. But he's all out for himself. And there's a thing that happens in his origin that seems to maybe, unless I'm reading too much into this, give him a little bit more of a regard for life than he had before, which is interesting because then he still becomes a villain and robs banks and takes advantage of people.
That's right. Yeah. We'll talk about it when we get there. This issue, I think, is one of the better ones we've had in a while. I like this one quite a bit, actually.
Yeah, I liked it a lot too. I think it's fun that Electro's lightning bolts that we see here on the cover, and we see them, of course, all throughout the issue, look exactly like the lightning bolts that he has for his costume. There's no difference.
Yeah, and I miss the electric.
They're just an extension of his suit.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. I always really liked the Electro mask design and the costume and everything, even though it's really goofy looking. I don't know, there's something that I've always really liked. I hate that in the modern comics whenever we use Electro. I think Dan Slott killed him recently, or someone that was doing one of the Spider-Man books killed him, and there's a girl Electro now because of course there is. But ever since The Amazing Spider-Man 2 came out, they put just a blue what would look like a sticker on his face or something instead of having it wasn't a tattoo or a sticker. It was obviously supposed to be a mask, but that's what it looked like because it's a drawn. I don't know. I miss the old mask. I don't know. There's something about this design I really like. But anyway,
I do like the '90s Electro suit a lot. That's the one I grew up with.
Sorry, what did you say? You cut out for a second there.
Oh, sorry. I do like the '90s Electro suit a lot. That's the one I grew up with, the one from the cartoon show.
That one, isn't it pretty similar to this one? Maybe I'm not remembering correctly. But
it's a little tweaked. I'll send you a picture while we're talking because that's professional.
Okay.
But anyway, let's. Oh, you know what? You're right. It is pretty similar to this.
Yeah, I thought so.
No, I thought it was. Okay, all right. So I guess I like the suit then. I thought it was different. Anyway, so let's get into this book-length comic colossal, Dan.
Yes.
With this scene that we'll never forget. Of course, I mean, again, being really super sensational about this, Spider-Man doesn't lose in this issue.
No, but it does look like he's dead for a second there.
There is that moment. Yeah, yes, for a second that happens. So, one thing I want to mention about this issue is with the narration box at the bottom of the splash page here, which is, by the way, one of the more glorious splash pages, I think.
I love it, yeah.
Stan Lee is starting to make a really big deal out of things people seem to just be saying to him about Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
There's a place toward the end where where the narration is Spider-Man, the hero that could be you, because people are imagining themselves in that mask because it covers your whole face. And I just think it's funny how thick he's laying all that stuff on.
Yeah, I think that's going with the whole teenager thing too, as well. That we may have been trying to capitalize on in the last issue, like we speculated. Just briefly about this splash page, I love it because we get all the classic Spider-Man floating heads things. It looks like the whole world is against him, and we have Electro shooting bolts down him, but he also looks like a puppet master too. It's so cool looking.
That's a really good point. Yeah, like he's able to control Spider-Man's whole life because this is a power that would be hard to go up against.
Yeah, and he kind of is the impetus for almost everything Peter Parker has to do in this issue. Like, he has to throw himself under the bus professionally here to get money to help Aunt May because she's really sick, and make it look like Spider-Man is Electro and all these kind of things. So, yeah.
I mean, he's he doesn't intentionally make that stuff happen, but you're right that at least indirectly he's behind everything.
Exactly, yeah. It's kind of like the lesson that Uncle Ben teaches Peter Parker, where if you use great power irresponsibly, there will be unforeseen consequences. Like, Electro is having an effect on this guy's life that he doesn't even realize because he's being a bad person.
Well, I like how overwhelmed Peter Parker is on both sides of his life, and that's also what this page is illustrating.
Yeah, and importantly, Jameson is on both sides of it, which is cool.
That's a really good point. Yeah, as his boss and as the main guy who hates Spider-Man publicly. I also think that when you put this many characters on a page like this, it's sort of Stan Lee and Steve Ditko rewarding the audience for sticking with them and paying attention and really looking at this. 9 issues in, it already feels like we've got kind of a mythology.
Oh yeah, definitely. I love, and of course this becomes a staple to kind of the Spider-Man. Like, we talked about the floating heads thing before, but it is cool that we've got the ongoing mythology thing going on here, and it only gets better once we get all of the main supporting cast members introduced, like Harry and Gwen and stuff later. It's cool.
Yeah, well, that's what kind of struck me about this is I'm like, a lot of those characters that we're going to deal with a lot aren't here yet, and yet it still feels like we've kind of built this world already.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
So getting into this, I think this first page is a lot of fun. Spider-Man and this web swinging stuff looks really good.
Oh yeah,
and I like Spider-Man at like night or twilight. I feel like the sun's just going down.
Well, that's the McFarlane fan in you, because he used to do that all the time.
yeah, it is. But I like the way the light is hitting Spider-Man on that bottom left panel.
Oh yeah, I agree. It looks great.
So he's in a big hurry. I think this is a really cool way to interrupt the status quo and introduce us to what's going on here, where something's got to be really wrong if Spider-Man, again, having learned the responsibility message, he always stops to help people and to stop crimes. At this point, he is the full bona fide superhero, and he just runs straight through a crime scene and doesn't stop.
Yeah, he doesn't. Initially you're kind of thinking to yourself, like, oh man, this is kind of contrary to the, great responsibility thing.
And then you realize it's priorities.
Yes, exactly. He can't be everywhere at once.
He does kind of get lucky that just his distraction makes the cops win that shootout.
Yes, that is true.
I think that's pretty funny, and I think Stan Lee's doing that on purpose so that we know right away that this is not another consequence he's going to have to deal with, because we're kind of keeping score at this point.
That's true. Yeah.
And so he's kind of just getting his ducks in a row so that we know that's not a thing we have to go back to. So Aunt May is super sick.
One of the many times Aunt May was sick.
He really just needs to start a Kickstarter for Aunt May's illnesses, because we're only 9 issues in. He's got to raise $1,000 for a surgery. Boy, if there were any surgeries left that only cost $1,000, Dan.
I was going to say that. I was thinking that when I was reading this issue. I was like, wow, $1,000 must have been so much money back in the 60s as well, with inflation and everything. I can't even imagine whatever procedure she's having done, what it would cost today.
It's like watching Price is Right from circa 1973 and seeing the price of the cars and going, wow, this game is a lot harder to play now.
Yeah, right.
So your classic superhero trying to balance both lives. He's still got to be Spider-Man, but he's got to raise this money, and she's going to have to go to the hospital pretty soon. Meanwhile, there's another new supervillain, and he's another guy who pretty much just wants money.
Yes, that is true. I kind of forgot that Electro had like a harness under his suit in his first appearance. When I was looking at this, I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Technology in the same way that Peter Parker has to augment his superpowers that he gets with technology in order to be effective.
That's a really great point, yeah, that he's not able to just shoot that lightning, any which way. You got to wonder how he came up with that apparatus, what his background is that allowed him to do that. I mean, I guess is he just an electrician?
He's a guy that works on power lines, so I guess he would understand that technology to some degree, yeah.
Yeah, but I wouldn't think he like we're not given anything in his background specifically that makes him that gives him the credentials of inventor.
That's true. Am I the only one that thought that these guys that have the money here look like they're in Nazi uniforms?
No, I didn't think of that.
They look like the brown Nazi uniforms to me, at least in this thing we're looking on the screen here. I didn't think of that when I was reading it, but just looking at them here, I don't know if because sometimes the coloring changes. Yeah,
it's a little different with what we're looking at here, because I was looking at this in a print volume also, and I don't think they looked like that.
And obviously that's not what they're intending, because,
No, certainly not. And I mean, police uniforms...
I just thought it was funny.
Police uniforms in America during that period, a lot of them did look like that, and we had hats, and, I mean, even, like, obviously this is a silly comic book thing, but, like, the 60s Batman uniforms for the cops kind of look like that. But, yeah, I don't even know if they're brown or if it's just the way the lighting is hitting them.
That's true.
With that color scheme. But anyway, moving right along. I like this touch of the bullies are still after Peter Parker and he's not giving them the time of day because heavy things are happening.
And this is kind of a staple of Peter Parker's behavior later on when we meet characters like Gwen Stacy and Harry Osborn. Like, initially, those characters don't really like Peter at all because he seems to be really distant and doesn't give them the time of day and seems way too too much like a shut-in and very introspective.
Yeah.
And they just don't realize what's going on in his life. But when he opens up later to them, obviously he grows on them and things like that. This is kind of the first time we really see that effect that he has on people, and I like that about his character. In contrast, we see Betty Brant is kind of the only one that is interested in the fact that he's so distant with her to some degree, at least. Like they were intimate. They had an intimate moment like a few issues ago, but he still, to her, seems like he has a secret that she'd never learn about, even if they became closer.
And she's about the only person that's getting close enough that she would notice it, because Aunt May is a little senile and she's sickly and she's not picking up on that. And really, most everybody else in his life doesn't you take him seriously.
That's right. And of course, we do kind of retcon the Aunt May thing later, where, later on, where it's like, oh, she knew the entire time. But obviously, if you just read these issues, it doesn't seem like she's picking up on it at all.
Yeah, if she is, she's really playing into the senility thing.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's kind of what they make the retcon. Like, she just acts really oblivious, and Peter Parker just wishfully believes it because he's like, this would, I mean, would have a heart attack if she ever knew about this, but she's actually stronger than Peter anticipated.
She's like, what? If you look like a skeleton that's wasting away, you would take advantage of that too.
That's true, yeah.
I don't really care for what we do with Flash Thompson at the top of this page. He's kind of, for a second, being a little bit more human and trying to get Peter to just stop for a second and tell him what's going on, because I think he can tell like something serious is going on, and so he's not going to keep playing the bully, at least here for a second. And Peter just keeps walking like he has been, and just saying I want to talk to you isn't enough to make Peter think you're going to do anything but harass him. So it kind of bugs me that he's then like, okay, whatever, you're still a jerk and stupid, and I don't care anymore. I didn't really like that. I think he should have pursued it a little farther.
I don't think it's as much that Flash realizes there's something like serious going on in his life. He says there that he wants to talk to him to just kind of congratulate him on getting the good hit that he got on him, because him and Peter both know that like he wasn't like there wasn't any like faking, and Flash just is pretending to go with what Peter said. That he was like rolling with the punches and stuff to look good. Right?
Yeah, you're right. Now that I'm looking at this again, he just says, he's to himself. He's more of a man than I thought, and he says maybe I've been too hard on him. But so, like he's not picking up on it's a thing going on with his home life, but there's something upsetting him, and he cares about that suddenly, and that's like. Even if it's just about that fight, like that's more reasonable than he's ever been.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and Flash Thompson will obviously later on get developed into a more human character and become more likable in later things, especially in the 80s and the stuff we do with him when he becomes Venom and stuff.
So speaking of my McFarlane sensibilities, how about that bottom right panel?
Oh, that's great, isn't it? The black and white is awesome.
I always love that.
Yeah, and a little like realistic thing that I was thinking about. I was watching this. What other superhero comic at this time would have a superhero thinking about shutting the shades so no one can see them cleaning their costume?
Oh, that's a really good point. Yeah. Yeah, I think Stan Lee has reason to be like, look how realistic my comic is. I think it's hilarious that he keeps saying it.
Yeah.
Like on the page to the reader.
I love J. Jonah Jameson in this issue too, because he's just a classic ignoramus that needs a scapegoat, where he's just like, somebody knows who I am and is bad. He must be Spider-Man immediately without any proof.
Well, and actually that bugged me. I think that's really funny, but the idea of somebody recognized me, it must be someone I know. You're a public figure. That makes no sense.
That's true. He has been on TV.
He's been on television.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know what he was on. He was, and he pats himself on the back for his incredible deductive reasoning.
Yeah. Well, I can picture him like patting himself on the back for figuring out something that's obvious because he's J. Jonah Jameson and he has a giant ego. But
that's not even accurate.
Yeah, that's true.
So Electro just happens to break into the place where J. Jonah Jameson is. That's convenient.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we do that a lot, where we try to get him in danger as much as possible. Because it's fun to have a situation where Spider-Man has to rescue him.
Well, yeah, it's fun to involve anyone that Peter Parker knows personally in the action. Like, Stan Lee will do that all the time with like Aunt May and Gwen and all those kind of characters. Captain Stacy later on, we'll see. Just to add another dramatic element to the action of the story.
I think it's... looking at this again, I'm thinking... It's funny how we made such a big deal out of how powerful the Vulture is, and we're not using that kind of rhetoric here.
Yeah, that's right.
Like the most powerful villain Spider-Man has ever faced. And then this guy comes in and he's legitimately a problem.
Yeah, and he can even like climb walls like Spider-Man and stuff.
Yeah. Which, of course, here in a minute, that's about to get hilarious.
Yeah, it is. In Electro, we changed his powers later on to make him more powerful. Not like in any in-story reason. He just becomes much more powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Where he can like fly around with electricity. And I think in Ultimate he can like travel through like power lines and stuff. I haven't read that stuff in a long time, but he's really powerful in that.
I know there's at least one cartoon version that does that too.
Yeah. This scene specifically with the bank robbery, there is a scene similar to this that actually involves Doc Ock that they pulled for Spider-Man 2. But this scene specifically reminded me a lot of the bank heist scene for Spider-Man 2.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. I like that Electro's powers here do parallel Spider-Man's to a degree. I like because we play with powers in these, really loosely, and we're not really, we're not thinking about real science, and so Stan Lee gets really clever. Like the idea, okay, if he's not going to move through electric currents, the idea that because he's an electric guy, static cling and stuff, maybe he could climb walls. I think that's kind of fun.
It is cool, and whenever he's shooting the bolts, he uses them to like incapacitate people. Like Spider-Man would tie them up with webs, and he looks like he's doing the web kind of motion when he's opening the safe there. I don't know. I think it's done on purpose. It's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So
and here we have J. Jonah Jameson yelling,
as usual, and he's being slanderous like he always is. That must be Spider-Man. Just the idea, like, how do you come up with this, right? How do you come up with Spider-Man must have shed his other costume and put this one on? It's Spider-Man in disguise.
Well, and it's interesting too, right? Because he's accusing Spider-Man of making a bad guy so that he can look like he can show up later and look like he's the good guy and save the day and get credit for it. But that's kind of exactly what Peter Parker does with the photos.
Oh yeah, that's exactly right.
So there's another parallel there that's kind of interesting that I was thinking of when I was reading this. J. Jonah Jameson is wrong in accusing Spider-Man of doing that, but he's not really that far off.
I suppose that's true, although, correct me if I'm wrong, I didn't think it was Jameson who specifically came up with the idea of maybe Spider-Man is doing this to pretend like he's taking in a villain. I thought somebody else who read his article deduced that.
Well, why else would Spider-Man do that? Like, there would be no other logical reason for him to do that.
Because he's not logical, Dad. Because J. Jonah Jameson just goes, there's a guy doing bad things on the street, he's wearing a costume, it's Spider-Man.
I mean, if there's any other logical reason, maybe Jameson came up with that, but I was just assuming that's what he thought because Jameson thinks Spider-Man's a glory hog and things like that.
Because that logic is here, but I don't think it actually comes from Jameson.
Yeah, maybe not. I don't know.
We'll look for it, and we'll see which one of us is right about that.
Yeah. Jameson has the history of, like, thinking Spider-Man is all out for himself and, like, glory hounding and stuff, so I don't know. I think it's pretty safe to assume that's most likely what he thought, but I don't know. I do like that we have the reaction from the public here, and this is kind of the way that slander affects public discourse and why it's illegal in the first place.
Yeah.
Like, even if there is no proof and the thing is disproved, there still always will be a percentage of people that believe these rumors, and they will persist. Which is
in print, and we see multiple times in this issue. I don't think it's from the same person every time, but it might be. We see the line, "They wouldn't print it if it wasn't true."
Yeah, exactly.
I really like that. There's some really obvious on the nose social commentary there, but I like it.
Yeah, I do too.
So I'll ask you this question, and this is not a criticism necessarily, but I wonder why Peter doesn't go ahead and tell J. Jonah Jameson why he wants the loan.
Yeah, I didn't understand that either.
Unless he's just like really proud, or maybe it's supposed to be just, Jameson doesn't let him get a word in edgewise, so maybe he would have told him, but then when he immediately just jumps to, "I don't give loans, you're an idiot, you know that," he's like, "Okay, fine, I'm not even going to deal with you."
I'm with you. I kind of assumed it was a pride thing where it's kind of that old school thing where, like, you don't want to necessarily involve people too deeply in your problems. It's kind of a shameful thing to kind of ask for money like that, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it would be shameful in general for, like, most people, but I think, like, it's a really shameful thing for Peter Parker specifically because it's like he's supposed to be the man of the house now, and he has this problem that he's forced to ask Jameson help for, and he's kind of ashamed of it possibly.
And that was certainly the more common sensibility at that time, like across the country. I mean, it's easy to think of that as like more Southern values, but I think at this time in our history, that was more across the board. Like, you don't ask people for money. But to be fair, a lot of people still feel that way.
That is true, yeah.
But I liked that he's like, he takes the initiative and he says, it might be a pride thing, because he even says in this last panel, if this idea works that I just came up with, I won't have to beg money from anyone. Like, he uses the word beg. He doesn't want to do that. And that's how he would have been raised by Uncle Ben.
That's right. And the pride thing does come into play later when he is kind of he's kind of iffy about doctoring the photographs and selling them to Jameson.
Yeah, which we'll talk about, because I have an issue with that.
Do you? Okay.
It's just in the way he words it. I'm wondering about a thing, but we'll get there when we get there.
Okay.
So he's just going around looking for Electro. This is a really big city. You could go all night without finding the guy.
That's very true.
You got no leads. You got nothing. You're just like, okay, I'm looking for a guy in a green unitard with yellow lightning bolts all over himself. He looks like a Flash villain. Where is he?
Yes, and this is a classic kind of Spider-Man thing that we do all the time, too, where he's just, like, out of control. Like, I think a lot of the later issues that we'll see of Spider-Man just start here, where he's out of control looking for someone, and he just happens to find them. Yeah, I mean, realistically, in New York City, even at this time, where it was probably somewhat smaller than it is today, I would imagine.
It's like that thing in the Daredevil movie where Electra walks up behind Matt Murdock and she's like, I knew I would find you. And I'm like, how did you do that?
Yeah. Well, and to be fair, Spider-Man does have spider sense, and that's how he kind of comes, when he comes close to him, he can sense him. But yeah, I'm with you. Like, he would have to just happen to swing in the general vicinity of him to find him.
I do like this panel at the top where he's like, I found him. It's just an old man with a telescope.
Yeah.
I don't know why he thought that must be Electro. I mean, like, he just assumed, okay, if there's a dude on a roof, it must be the bad guy I'm looking for.
Yeah, I've never been to New York, so I don't know how many people just hang out on roofs there. Maybe it's a thing.
So what he's doing is he's like, if I can bring in Electro, then I'll be able to. Isn't it like I'll bring in Electro? He's wanted. I'll get the money that I need for the surgery.
Yes, that's correct.
And but I like that he's like, oh, and I'll take some pictures too, because you might as well also make your normal money.
That's right, and his plan here, I think, is interesting because, like, if Spider-Man brought Electro in this time, Jameson would definitely accuse Spider-Man of also being Electro and just turning villains in for money.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He would have. Yeah, you'd almost have to do it as Peter Parker somehow, but he wouldn't do it that way.
No, he wouldn't. Of course not. Because then the suspicion would be, Peter Parker must be Spider-Man if he was able to bring this guy in.
And on this next page, here's a great example of his lightning bolts looking just like the lightning bolts on his costume. So on this next page, we have a great example of his lightning bolts looking just like the ones on his costume.
Yes, and it is awesome.
I really expected that water tower or whatever it is to fall down.
Yeah, I did too. And it didn't happen.
Yeah. I mean, usually we drop it. Although, if you think about it, we're on page 10. Had that happened, the issue is over.
Yeah, I was going to say, isn't it interesting the way that Peter Parker beats Electro at the end of the issue is right there in their first confrontation, and he doesn't realize it.
Actually, and that would have to be a water tower.
That's true, yeah.
Good call. I didn't think of that until we were until we were looking closer at that. And he tries a lot of different things before he finally comes up with that, and I like that he kind of kicks himself.
Yeah, because it's so obvious.
He's like, oh yes, I should have used water. But Stanley makes, I don't mean to get ahead of myself, but they make me buy it because he's so scatterbrained right now, and his head's everywhere because of Aunt May.
Yeah, and he prepares so heavily for that fight where he makes like the rubber gloves and the boots and stuff, so it's like it's almost like he overthought it,
Yeah, he's not thinking of anything else other than that initial solution. I really like that panel that we got a couple pages ago where he's trying to do his homework and he reads the same page 12 times.
Yeah, I've done that myself.
Yeah, that's where we get a little bit of actual realism, sneaking in here.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So I think the fights with Electro look really great.
Oh yeah, it does. It's not in this issue, but I think it's the second time Electro shows up. There's kind of like a blown up version of that bottom left panel there, where there's a bright purple background. It's spectacular. It's a full page. I can't wait until we get to that because it's just a beautiful piece of art. I wish I could have it as a poster.
Spider-Man seems to get in these situations a lot where we see him kind of leaning down in pain at the end of a fight, and I like that a lot. He doesn't win easily a lot of the time.
No, he doesn't. He usually loses the initial confrontation with the villains, at least in these early issues.
Yeah, and he ought to, because, you know, it kind of, if this is supposed to be a more human story, and it's supposed to be about a hero that's more in over his head, he's supposed to feel like a real person and not just the stalwart hero that always wins. He can't win every fight and always know exactly what he's doing.
Well, yeah, that's a very human thing, right? Like, you have to fail before you learn how to do anything.
Yeah, and then if he fails and then he learns something from it, it's a lot more poignant. It means more to him, and he's probably less likely to, you know, regress.
Exactly.
So he brings in the is this where he brings in the pictures? Where
Yes.
he's pretending like where he's pretending like Electro and Spider-Man are the same person. I was surprised he went that far.
Yeah, I did too. I was kind of initially, but at the same time, the fact that he's the fact that we established how desperate he is at the very beginning of the issue, I was like, oh yeah, I mean, maybe I can see it.
Oh yeah, it totally works. I'm not even criticizing it. I was just like in a dramatic, like, I'm enjoying the issue kind of way. I was like, oh
yeah, totally, yeah.
I like that. What's okay? This is the thing I question though. It took me a minute to realize what he was talking about, and it's still weird, but it's better than I thought it was. He says, I hate taking money under false pretenses. I'll make up for it somehow. Mm-hmm. And what he means is that he's lying to Jameson about what happened. Now, he has actually done this before, but just not to this degree. Where he, like, threw sand in the air and pretended like he was fighting Sandman and took pictures of it.
Right, he was recreating events that actually happened.
So he was able to justify that a little bit more to himself. The problem I have with this is, and I've always to a degree kind of questioned the morality of this. He, like his job at the Bugle, his bringing J. Jonah Jameson pictures, is already under false pretenses.
In the sense that he is taking pictures as a different person.
Yeah, that he's pretending like he just gets lucky and he goes to these places and he finds Spider-Man and he takes pictures, but it's actually a setup. He's taking pictures of himself. That is still dishonest. It's not this dishonest.
Yeah, I mean, it's dishonest in the sense that Peter Parker has to kind of be dishonest in almost every aspect of his life, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely, certainly. If he's gonna feel bad about this, I wish he questioned his his regular method of making money earlier on a little bit.
Sure, yeah.
That's the only reason I'm bringing it up, is that I was surprised that we broached it here when I've always thought of that, and now suddenly we're bringing it up.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a different situation, and so it's making me think about that again.
Mm.
Yeah. But anyway, I just, like, technically it already is under false pretenses.
Yeah, sure.
But that's all I wanted to say about that. So we publish the paper, and, you know, for once, Jameson actually thinks the news he's publishing is real news.
Yeah, the headline is so ridiculous. I laughed out loud while reading this.
And then we've got Electro kind of cackling because he thinks that he's taken out Spider-Man. And
then he will regale no one with the story of his origin.
Oh, yeah, that's a great point. Why is he talking about how he got his electric powers? I didn't think of that.
I have no idea. But basically, the origin is, just a brief summary, Max Dillon is an electric worker. Someone's caught in the lines and is about to be electrocuted because there's a malfunction. Max Dillon won't help him unless he's paid $100. He goes up to try to help the guy. He saves the guy, but is electrocuted and gets electric powers.
So it's basically karma.
Yes.
It's lightning karma.
Yes. So this is like when, Peter Parker didn't stop that burglar, because he felt like the promoter had wronged him, and, he was only out for himself. Same thing with Max Dillon. Like, why should I help other people if I'm not being rewarded for it? That kind of thing.
Yeah. And I guess the difference is he doesn't still learn that lesson because he doesn't have a guide.
Well, in his situation, it seems like he was rewarded for it, right? Like, he got $100 and electric powers for being a jerk.
Well, that's a good point. He doesn't lose anyone. No, you're right. I mean, Peter Parker loses Uncle Ben. He just gets electric powers, which he doesn't seem to have any problem learning to control. I mean, like, it could be a curse, except he's able to control it pretty readily.
And they do play it like that in later Electro stories. They do.
Amazing Spider-Man 2 does that.
Yeah, and they do add, like, I think, I forget what story, but there is, like, other people, it's like he has a girlfriend that, she's, like, was with him before, and she was, like, the only person that was ever important to him, and, like, something happens to her as a result of this stuff, so, yeah.
So this is where we get into amusing territory to me for don't do this at home, kids. Max Dillon, in explaining his backstory, says, this is 1,000,000 to 1 chance, but he explains it as he gets his powers due to the way he had been grasping the electric wires.
Yeah, it's really wonky.
Which makes me think, okay, if you could figure out exactly how he did it, anybody could get electric powers. Just go up onto a power line, wait till there's a storm, just hold them the right way. I mean, there's not like a Smallville kryptonite stand in here at all. It doesn't mix with anything.
Yeah, see, like, I had a friend that tried to follow some of Stan Lee's advice about getting powers before. Like, he just blew up a radiation bomb in his house, and he just died. He didn't turn into a big angry monster.
He just gone on a power line and held it the right way. But Ditko is very careful to not show a close-up of his holding power lines in a particular way.
I think that's a product of Stan Lee trying to figure out what Ditko was trying to convey. Like, that's just too weird to me. You know what I mean?
You're right, but I think it might have also been his idea in the first place. And who knows? But the reason I say that is because I read a couple of the letters in the letters pages from last issue.
Oh,
and
cool.
There is a guy who's complaining about how everything is radiation. And he's like, the one thing, I have all of your Spider-Man magazines, and the one thing that I don't like is that everybody gets powers from radiation. And that makes me think that this might be a product of Stan Lee trying to come up with something that's not radiation.
Yeah, I'm just talking about specifically, like, him holding the power lines. Like, he could have gotten it from, like, it didn't come in thinking, like, the transformer overloaded on the top of the pole or something like that.
I mean, between those two panels, we don't see him do anything in particular, and it's a back-off shot.
Right, exactly. I think Stan Lee was like, how did he come in contact with the electricity? He was holding them in the right way.
And he was thinking about his mother's birthday, and it was Thursday, and it was between the hours of 3 and 4.
The planets aligned, and
that's how it happens.
Yes.
Because otherwise, it is not 1,000,000 to 1 chance.
No, definitely not.
Anyway, so then he comes up with his apparatus because he's an electric genius apparently.
Mm-hmm. And he goes to the prison to release all of the criminals from Blackgate and tear all the rich from their decadence. No, he just wants money.
Is that the first part of his revolution, Dan?
Yeah. He just wants money, and he's trying to get some thugs to help him do his schemes. And Electro doesn't anticipate that the thugs won't all listen to him.
Yeah, he's so powerful that he thinks he can control people just because he's scary.
Exactly. I do like that he kind of overestimates the power that he has over people, not just like the ability to manipulate his environment with electricity. It's cool.
I think besides the whole age parallel thing, the age or mirroring that we talked about with Vulture. I think Electro is kind of like Vulture 2.0. It's like we've kind of reinvented and repackaged that character and made him Electro. He's kind of Vulture but better.
Yeah, I think this issue does a much better job of mirroring the two characters. Because like a lot of the Spider-Man rogues, and even like Dr. Octopus initially is just motivated by like greed and stuff. Green Goblin's like the one when he shows up initially that isn't motivated strictly by greed. He's more of a power hungry, wants to control all of the underground crime in New York City. That's kind of his initial motivation.
Yeah, which is appropriate because he's already rich.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
again,
And you don't know that at that point. Yeah.
Oh, okay. But these are supposed to be foils for Spider-Man, where he's, he was initially also motivated by greed.
Right. That's true.
So we're in the hospital, and
Eddie Brand shows up, makes her, really awesome.
Yeah, I like that a lot. It's starting to feel more like a thick personal drama for Peter Parker, where he's actually got people that come and show up and care for him. Part of the thing that's really challenging with Spider-Man stories is he doesn't have anybody to talk to.
That's right, and that's why I always said, like, when we were reading the Miles Morales book early on, one of my main complaints with, like, the early issues and how they were kind of decompressed was, I was like, this is a Spider-Man story, and we're like 12 issues in, he doesn't have a girlfriend yet. He had Gang, who's, like, his best friend, who we could talk to and stuff, but, like, some of my favorite characters in the Spider-Man mythology were all love interest characters, because those are like the ones that he has the deepest, most intimate connection with personally, other than Aunt May. And I love Betty for that. She becomes one of my favorite characters in the early run here. She's great.
And of course, that always complicates the responsibility question, because you have to, and this issue is all about prioritization. You got to decide if your friends and family are more important than the guy getting robbed down the street. The more personal relationships that you build, the harder it is to make those kinds of choices.
Exactly. Yeah.
And of course, that's gotten really typical. We do that with every superhero now.
That's right. Yeah, and. Here, in this conversation that we have with Betty, we learn that she has a secret, too, that she isn't comfortable about telling Peter about, which will get interesting as we move along through these issues. We're building an ongoing drama with these characters, finally, which is cool.
Yeah, this is the first time we've really done anything like that.
That's right, and that will become, obviously, a staple of the book. I think this is kind of the issue where I think the book begins to hit its stride of being the Spider-Man ongoing story that everyone thinks of when they think of Spider-Man.
Yeah, we've had a little bit of that sense of long-form storytelling, but mostly just in Peter Parker developing himself into the superhero in the first place, where you can see some real progression in those first few issues, even though they're all one-and-done stories. We're starting to get away from that.
Exactly, yes.
Which is exciting, because that makes going page by page make a lot more sense.
It does, yes. We're not going to have any of those random Doctor Doom issues, at least hopefully, right?
I don't know. I'd take one or two more of those.
Yeah, you're right. They were pretty fun.
That was pretty. As long as he's got a helicopter, I'm good. Yeah, you're right. This does look like a mob of Blackgate prisoners.
Take it from the corrupt!
New York City is yours!
They're even having a giant street battle with the cops. It's totally Dark Knight Rises.
It's not snowing. It's the only thing. It's New York City, so it could be, depending on what time of year it is. Anyway, yay for armpit webbing. I know I say that all the time, but that's a great panel.
Yes. That's so awesome.
Super cool panel.
And Jameson realizes he's wrong, and is angry at Peter.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll get to that resolution in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
So, I guess we'll just keep moving on, unless there's anything else on this page you want to talk about.
I don't think so.
Spider-Man's just gearing up for that fight, getting his rubber gloves on and stuff. Again, this is him using his science knowledge and wit.
Yeah, overthinking it a little bit, like you said earlier.
And then we got your spider signal, Dan.
I love the spider signal. It made me so happy that we're bringing old school Spider-Man things like that back in the movies. It's so awesome.
I think it's pretty effective here. People often, and I'm included in this, ask, and we've talked about this before, what the heck it's for, like why you would want to warn people. But it's like this big distraction. It's like, oh, holy crap, Spider-Man's here. Like, people, like if you've had a good track record and people have heard that you've taken down a lot of bad guys in street thugs and stuff, you wouldn't see that signal and look up and be like, oh, I'm gonna get him. You'd be like, ah, crap, it's going down now.
Exactly. Yeah,
and I think that's the idea. Although it's a good thing that none of these guys ever take out guns.
That is right. Yes,
because that would be the place where that backfires, right? Like, oh, shoot at the place where the beam is coming from.
Yeah, and thankfully Spider-Man has spider sense and reflexes and all that, so we can dodge the bullets. But yeah, you're right.
So he would be a superhero that could maybe get away with doing that, but I don't know why you would risk it every time.
Yeah, that's right. The Punisher certainly wouldn't do that.
So this is just like the whole prison breakout thing is just so that he's got thugs, but I think he's really smart for doing that.
Yeah, you think so?
Well, yeah, because a lot of these guys have just kind of gone on their own and been like, "Look how powerful I am," and yeah, like it's maybe hard for him to control this many prisoners.
Yeah,
but it is a quick way to rally a gang, I guess.
That is true. Yeah.
I don't know. I just think that compared to what we've had before, he's a little bit smarter about how he goes about things, even over Dr. Doom.
I want Electro to have overly complicated tech bases.
And that guy's supposed to be a genius.
Yeah, he is. He's supposed to rival Ray Richardson intellect. But anyway.
Like, I kind of like the idea that he's just street smart, where he doesn't have to be brilliant or anything.
Well, that's what, like a lot of the Spider-Man villains are like that, which is what I've always liked about them. They're just kind of like average people with superpowers. And they're appropriate threats for Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Like, Dr. Doom is a character that it's fun to see Spider-Man fight once, but he's not a character that you want to see Spider-Man deal with like all the time because he's just out of Spider-Man's league. Like, these are the guys that you want to see him fight, just like, blue-collar dudes that got superpowers.
Well, the whole point of that issue was he's out of his league and he's not ready to be doing this.
Exactly, right. I love this panel on the bottom right there where he's jumping over those guys up the stairs. It looks great.
Yeah, that's really cool. And he is still fighting these guys.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at the art here. I was just so impressed. Like, that bottom left panel where he's kind of like ducking under the lightning bolt. I was reminded of like Mark Bagley, the way he draws Spider-Man in the face specifically, and the way he moves and stuff. Like, you can see, Ditko, his influence all over the rest of the people who draw Spider-Man for decades and decades to come.
Yeah, it's fascinating when you've read mostly modern Spider-Man comics to go back to this stuff and realize, and be at home. Like, it's very familiar. Even if you've
definitely
never looked at this stuff before. Every now and again, I'll see a panel where I'm like, oh, that's just what we were doing in the 90s. Like, it didn't change.
Yeah, and Peter David made this comment once about Spider-Man because he's never had like a really long run on that book, like, or any of those books in the same way that he's wrote Hulk for like a decade or whatever.
Yeah.
But he said that the problem for him with writing Spider-Man is that Stan Lee, Ditko, and Romita did everything there is to do with that character, and everyone that's come on the book since has just been spinning their wheels.
Yeah.
And I think to some degree he's right about that.
Yeah, and maybe that's true even in the artwork.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so I think it's weird that Spider-Man would throw sand, and just because he can, Electro would turn it into glass. What is the point of that? Why not just move out of the way?
I thought it was funny, too. Like, he's just like, didn't you know? I can turn this into glass.
It's like, oh, well, I wouldn't have thrown a bucket of sand at you if I knew you were going to turn it into something as innocuous coming at you as glass.
Yeah.
And then Spider-Man's like, oh, well, I did that because I knew you'd show off. And yeah, that is what he does. He shows off. But, like, I just, the idea that you'd be like, because I understand my power set, if I see sand, it's getting turned into glass. There's no reason to do that.
Yeah, it makes you want to see a fight between Electro and the Sandman, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Well,
yeah.
I think Sandman loses immediately.
but then he would become Glass Man.
He just turns into glass, and he's like, "Oh, well, I've got a new power now." Anyway, that's my favorite part in the whole issue. Is he's just like, "Oh, sand, whatever, glass." I would have loved it if he was like, "Wait a minute, why did I do that?"
Does that even work?
I don't think that quickly it would.
Because I always thought that you would. I am not an artist or someone that makes glass, so I don't know these things. If you people in the comments know anything about how to make glass, let us know. But I was under the impression that you had to heat sand up a lot, and of course electricity generates heat, but I didn't think you could just, like, shoot electricity at sand and it would turn into glass.
Yeah, I don't think it's automatic. I'm pretty sure it wouldn't be automatic like that, no matter how hot it was.
Like, I thought you would have to run electric current through something to then heat the sand to make glass, but I could be wrong.
I feel like it would take some time.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I don't know.
Best part of the whole issue. It's my favorite part. And then he comes up with water, and he's like, "Oh my god, what is wrong with me?"
That's right. And this panel in the bottom left here, where we reveal who Electro is, and Spider-Man has no idea who he is.
I love that.
This is something, supposedly, this is kind of like a legend. It's never been confirmed if it's 100% true, but a lot of people speculate this is the case because when Steve Ditko left the book. Steve Ditko supposedly thought that most of Spider-Man's villains should be people Spider-Man doesn't know personally because it's more realistic.
Yeah.
And supposedly the dispute that made Ditko leave the book was that Stan Lee wanted to make the Green Goblin Norman Osborn, and Steve Ditko said, that's unrealistic. If the villains that Peter fight wouldn't be someone that he knows, but Stan Lee said, well, even if it's not realistic, that makes the story more dramatic and interesting, and we can do it makes the story more interesting for people to read. And that supposedly was one of the main reasons why Ditko ended up leaving. And John Romita, he comes on right when Ditko leaves, and that's the arc where we reveal who the Green Goblin is almost immediately. So this panel just reminded me of that because this is kind of the big reveal where Spider-Man gets to learn who one of his rogues is, and he's not anybody that he knows.
When I liked it, and I mean, I don't think the show had started yet, but I like that it's basically like the flip of Scooby-Doo. I always wanted that moment in Scooby-Doo where you take the mask off and you're like, oh, wait, who is that guy?
Yeah.
Like, mysteries would sometimes end that way, right? Where you're like, oh, we finally found the guy. That was not someone that we have been introduced to in this manufactured plot before.
Well, yeah, exactly. Like, imagine you're a police officer, like, and you're investigating a murder case of someone that, your friend got murdered or something. You might not necessarily know the person that murdered them,
Well, and you also might not necessarily stumble upon it during your investigation. You could catch the guy some other way, like while he's wearing a mask or something. Like, you could try to track him down and not actually know who he was when you found him.
That's true, yeah.
So, no, I liked that a lot. That was just some guy.
Yeah.
And we're making a big deal out of that. And I think that's more impactful then because you never got that in comics right then.
That's very true. That's right. The identity of the supervillain was either ambiguous, they didn't really have one, or it was someone intimately connected with the superhero's personal life.
Yeah, and it certainly wouldn't just be some dude that worked on the power lines.
Exactly, right, yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't think. I think there are some goofy supervillains that have those kinds of backstories even in Golden Age.
Yeah, I think some of the Flash rogues are like that.
But it wasn't, it probably wasn't super common. Anyway, so how do you feel about this resolution where J. Jonah Jameson is like, my newspaper is ruined because no one will take me seriously now? And then Peter Parker brings him new pictures that he can verify are actually real this time, and then he's like, oh, okay, I'm saved now? I don't know about that. I get that he thinks the pictures are valuable, and so he's going to be buddy with Peter Parker again. But I don't get why he thinks that will give him the kind of credibility he needs to fix his newspaper if he thinks he's totally ruined.
I don't know if it's credibility with Jameson at this point. I think he knows that anything with Spider-Man will sell, and now that he's got these what looks to be priceless photos of him fighting Electro, he can sort of pseudo-print a retraction and just make a ton of money, and people will, he'll retain the reputation as being the paper that has pictures of Spider-Man.
Yeah, no, that's a good
I don't know.
What he should really do, of course, is print a front page article that says, "We lie to you all the time. Why is this time any different?"
Hello?
Dan, are you there?
Hello? Yeah, I cut out again.
That's all right. What he should do, of course, is just print a front page article that says, "What? We lie to you all the time. Why is this time any different?"
J. Jonah Jameson would not allow himself to admit such things.
Oh, no, that's true. I love the greedy faces on the bottom, just all three of them.
This entire scene is hilarious. Just J. Jonah Jameson is one of my favorite things about Spider-Man in general. Like, he's so funny.
It just looks like Willy Wonka just gave him the chocolate factory.
Yeah, and the panel where Peter's looking over his shoulder while he looks at the pictures too, his face in that is priceless as well.
That's true.
Well, that's great.
So now we get to the drama of, Peter, you keep throwing yourself into danger. And I'm not going to tell you about my past that makes that a problem for me, but it's a problem.
Yeah, and I like that Peter Parker sees something in this girl, because she's kind of the opposite of the girls that he goes to high school with that don't give him the time of day, like Liz Allen and stuff. Like, they like the guy that's bombastic and will charge into, dangerous situations. Like, whenever Peter Parker seemingly flees away from danger, when he goes to be Spider-Man, all of the girls are like, oh, like, this guy's a loser because he's a coward. And Betty Brant's like, no, like, I don't really appreciate when men throw themselves into danger head first and don't really think about what they're doing. I prefer someone that doesn't do those sorts of things. She's the contrast, at least in that situation, in that part of her personality. It's interesting.
And even though we don't know what the background is yet, I like that it comes from some kind of a place, because we play this for cheap drama all the time, especially these days, where you have the girl that's just unreasonable and not understanding that, like, my boyfriend or my husband or whatever is a superhero. He's going to go out. It's going to be dangerous. And a lot of the time, part of the reason that she's into him in the first place is because of all that.
Yeah.
And I really like that Betty Brant doesn't have that. She's reasonable. And I also really love how reasonable they both are by the end of this. That it doesn't end in just the person walking away angry, that stereotypical thing.
Yeah.
It's like she comes back and apologizes, and then, like, they're talking and communicating and being people. I really like how this issue ends.
Me too, and I think the thing that makes her endearing, they don't really bring it up explicitly, but they do contrast her with the kids at school in another way, in that Peter Parker looks really distressed, and he kind of gives them the cold shoulder, and they just say, wow, this guy's a jerk, without investigating or talking to him. Betty Brant, when she sees that Peter Parker is downtrodden and, like, doesn't want to talk to anybody, she investigates and goes to visit his aunt in the hospital and consoles him without even, like, being prompted to do so.
Well, importantly, with the both of them, this is maturity that comes from experience.
Exactly, yeah.
So with those kids at school, they're still, by and large, kind of dumb kids that haven't learned enough yet, but you kind of trust the book to turn them into something more three-dimensional, because they just haven't had those life experiences yet.
Right, yeah.
That's what this book is all about. And of course, we began with Peter as one of those kids.
Mm-hmm. And he was transformed, and Betty Brant has some kind of tragic thing that will be interesting to learn about as we move forward here.
We also we talked over it. We didn't talk about it when we were on that page, but I can't remember if we did this before. This issue, if we hadn't had it before, does straight up confirm that she did drop out of high school.
Yeah, that's right. I totally forgot about that.
And people had mentioned that in the comments, so I wanted to make sure that we talked about that she does come right out and say, like, that tells us right away, oh, she is Peter Parker's age, it's appropriate for them to date.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I had kind of forgot about that, because the most recent thing with them that I had been into before going back to read these again was Spectacular, and she's older than that. much older than him, and they kind of address it. They're like, yeah, I'm much older than you, but you're mature for your age and kind of cute, so we're going to go to the dance together and stuff. They don't form like an ongoing relationship like they do here, but, they talk about it in that show.
Well, and in modern day, that's more realistic. It'd be hard to imagine a girl dropping out of high school and getting that job now.
That's true, yeah.
I think.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Anything else you want to mention about this one?
No. Overall, I think this is one of the better issues we've had so far. I mean, I love this run in general, but some of the more recent issues had been not as progressive in terms of the moving the ongoing story along. But I think this one got a lot done. I love Electro as a mirror for Peter Parker. I think he's a pretty effective villain for this story. I liked this one all around. It was really good.
Yeah, it's quite dense, and I'm seeing the maturity in this book that we're supposed to also, or in this issue, that we're also supposed to be seeing Peter Parker have as things are getting more serious for him with having to deal with his aunt being sick and dealing with the supervillain this time.
Mm-hmm.
I think story-wise, this probably is the best one we've had so far.
Yes, and I wanted to mention, before we moved on, Peter Parker didn't wear his glasses at all in this whole issue, so you're right.
Yeah, cool. That is a nice bit of continuity.
Yes, it is.
And that means that that's a thing that the first Spider-Man movie pulled right out of this run.
They pull so much stuff. As we go along, you'll notice everything.
I just didn't know if that specifically was one, and it definitely is.
It is, yes, you're right.
Well, everybody, thanks always for listening, and watching. We sure appreciate it. And we will see you again next week with the 10th issue. Who is in the 10th issue? I haven't looked that one up.
The Enforcers. They're awesome.
Okay, all right. I have not read that issue, so I don't know anything about them.
They are awesome. They're a group of 3 thugs, and each of them has a theme, and they are awesome.
Awesome. Okay. Well, we'll see some enforcing going on next time. In the meantime, I am Captain Logan.
And I'm Dan.
We'll see you next time. Thanks, folks.